Today, we are also privileged to welcome Professor KELECHI KALU, who was here right 10 minutes before he was to give his speech. Was here. He's a professor of political science at the Ohio State University. He's an expert on safety and security. And I know that we in Columbus, Ohio, are invited him to several locations to give speeches on this particular area. Currently, he is the Associate Vice Provost for Global Studies, Global Strategies and International Affairs at the Ohio State University. He's one of our own. He's a high scholar. He has written several books and is highly published and highly respected by the international community. It is my high privilege and honor to welcome Professor KELECHI KALU, who will speak on safety and security and the Nigerian transformation agenda. Please join me to welcome him.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just slight correction. I like to be quite direct, but not as direct as Professor Vincent, who came before me. My actual title is Associate Provost for Global Strategies and International Affairs. And that is important to me because I don't want to be misidentified by anyone. And given that I represent an institution that is a major force, I also like to be able to say I spoke as a Nigerian, but within the role assigned to me in this institution. Your Excellencies, honored guests, fellow Nigerians, our friends, ladies and gentlemen, we have heard how often we are late, how often we need to be the change that we want to see, how we should truly engage, not just here, but at home, in order to bring about transformation in the geopolitical space we call Nigeria. Yes, I'm one of those professors who write books, articles, and we bicker about tenure, promotion, etc. In my 19 years in Colorado, part of which I spent traveling through Nigeria, giving lectures, not invited by anybody, I simply talked to my colleagues. I also, in one of those times, had the privilege to spend some time with a former president in Aso Rock. Some of us have gone as far as volunteering our services. Some of us were rejected. We were not rejected because we sought positions. No. We were rejected because we had ideas that were incongruent, inconsistent with the agenda on the table. The various locations Professor Vincent has been, I have been. I actually wrote one of the background papers for Rwanda. The only place I have been that I've never seen a Nigerian or even a black person was in Mongolia as an advisor and a consultant to the government on transformation. So when I think about the tasks I've been given, I told Tunde initially I wasn't going to honor this invitation because I am tired, not just from my work, but tired because our people often don't listen. There is nothing that I will tell you that you don't know. Absolutely nothing. The question is, what do we do with the knowledge that we have? On the issue of Nigeria as a whole, the key question really is, have we accepted the geopolitical space called Nigeria? We all know that Nigeria as a state, contrary to the other states where the diaspora played a role, was created by other states. But these other states were created by citizens struggling to conquer, dominate, and make sense of the space they call their home country. Not to disagree with the eminent speaker, but if you look at South Korea, Malaysia, Israel, all those countries, you had leaders on the ground and followers on the ground who were willing to welcome the diaspora voices. They were not only willing to welcome them, they were willing to create paths for them to indeed impose their own sense of expertise and consciousness on this space. To date, we are still bickering about Nigeria. If that weren't the case, why do we have many ungoverned spaces? Why do we have the problem in the northeast of Nigeria? Why do we have the ethnic uprising in parts of the Middle Belt? Why do we have contentious issues in the Niger Delta? Have we resolved that question? Because Nigeria's transformation will only occur when we have decided this geographic space belongs to all of us. I sat in Aso Rock and told the former president, not Jonathan Goodluck, I said there is only one thing you can do to leave a legacy for everyone in the country. That one thing is to take what we know works and make it a national consciousness issue. That is, irrespective of what language, what religion, what ethnic group you are in Nigeria, wherever you come from. If you have lived in any part of Nigeria for 1 year, as long as you're not causing any malfeasance, you should have all the rights and responsibilities of that location. I was told by the president, KALU, sit down until the private sector becomes the dominant employer of labor. The issue of indigeneity will continue to trouble Nigeria. I sat back because it actually made sense. It actually made sense. Until the private sector becomes the dominant employer of labor, seeking merit as the basis for bringing people in, seeking expertise as the basis for bringing people in, Nigeria will continue to be troubled. And that for me is scary. I know you've asked me to speak about safety and security. My most recent book is on US security and Africa relations. And the other book is on US war on terror, US West Africa war on terror. I'm quite vast in the field. But I want to talk to you about a different kind of security and safety. The most dangerous institution to Nigeria's safety is our educational system. It's the educational system that has failed to train the young minds to think about Nigeria as one, number one, to train the young minds in order to have an agenda for their lives and therefore be able to contribute to the country. you look at the drugs that are coming into Nigeria through the customs. Is the young man, the young woman at the gate knowledgeable about what other people are bringing into the country? I took my family home, my young kids. We are driving from Aba to River State to Port Harcourt, and a police officer stopped us. I had the anti-malaria medicine prescribed from my doctors here. All of a sudden, the young man started screaming, Oga, come, I don't catch them, no drugs. I don't catch them. And a car pulled up with 4 police officers. I was furious. I asked the officer, can't you read? Can't you read? This is on the road. I'm narrating safety issue from a personal. I've decided not to read 16-page paper I wrote for you, and I'll come to it shortly. From Akwa Ibom coming to Aba again, after giving a talk, I was stopped in the middle of the road by Nigerian immigration custom officers asking for my papers. Yes, safety issue. I did meet with leaders in the eastern part of Nigeria at Nike Resort in one of those trips. After discussing with them, I was supposed to be flown back to Abuja en route to the US. I decided no, I needed a car to travel from Enugu down to Abia State, specifically Umuahia. On our way, I saw at least 4 cops, dead cops, on the road. We have become so inhumane to our consciousness that the last right we owe each other, the decent disposal or burial, is no longer that important that people's dead body will be lying on the road. Cars going back and forth. That's a safety issue. It's a safety issue in the sense that some of those bodies may be diseased, and you pass by, birds, as was the case in one instance, pick up some things and drop them somewhere else where they should not be. If we seek to transform Nigeria, if we truly seek to transform Nigeria, we might want to start with policy transparency, policy accountability. Why is policy transparency important? It is important for ordinary Nigerians, both within and without, and our visitors to know what the government expects of each of us. The Human Rights Watch report just came out accusing Nigerian police of brutality, of torture. How do we defend that if we do not know exactly what the policies are? How do we defend that if we cannot speak clearly about the type of educational instructions given to the police force? If I go back a little bit to the comment I made about being in Asoro, I had the great privilege of chairing a subcommittee of the Transition Monitoring Group with the late Bekor Asankuti. One of the recommendations we made at that point was the Nigerian police force should be changed to Nigerian Police Service, and that they should go through a reorientation. And thirdly, every local area, the police force in every local area should have at least 50% representation and others coming from outside of that area. This was over 10 years ago. The only thing that was accepted was changing the Nigerian police force to Nigerian police service. Nothing else happened. I have personal knowledge of friends who have had this kind of problems with the forces instead of the service that we see. Policy transparency. It doesn't mean the Nigerian government needs to tell us everything, but they need to tell us what instructions, what mandate they have given to the police service in their relationship with the community. That is one way to ensure our safety. Another way to ensure our safety is transparency in citizens' participation in governance. Governance and leadership is not about the president, it's not about the minister, it's not about the governor, it's not about the pastor. It's about all of us, especially those of us. I know you've made a joke here about our women, whether they live longer or don't live longer. I appreciate that. But let us be leaders in our homes. In our homes, where we come from. Lead your children, lead your daughters, lead your wives in the right path. For when you can do that, you can lead the larger community. One of the other safety issues, and it's a dangerous one, I know I'm treading on a dangerous ground here, is religion. Everything in Nigeria we convert into religion. Christianity, Islam, you name it. Well, governance is not about religion. It is religion, but an accountable religion. Everything now we leave to that which we cannot confront. Well, part of the problem Nigeria is encountering its headaches is because the two key religions that dominate the country preach about afterlife. That's where the corruption comes from. If people know that they can misbehave today, be as corrupt as they want to be, and seek thank you. Redemption. What stops you from being corrupt? I've often argued against my own training. We should go back to the years of the Babalawos. Instant justice. Tell people if you're going to take public office, you should swear on something traditional. When you introduce that, when you introduce that, the fear of that instant justice is going to cause people to be respectful of the position, of the role, of the responsibility that they have been given. There is a matter of physical security, which we tend to see as peace. Prof, I really enjoyed your presentation. There is a tendency, though, about Nigerians. I know we talk, we are loud, people tell us. But look at the Nigerian universities. Professors refer to students who have families as children, as kids. We tend to shout and scream at each other. That screaming doesn't allow for deeper reflection. Looking at people as not grown up doesn't allow for deeper reflection. What we need to do is to think about physical security, not just in terms of hitting somebody, but also the psychological, physical insult that comes from the way we relate with and to each other. That is the only way we can look the policeman in the eye, the soldier in the eye, and tell them I have rights. And not be cowed by their screaming because the civilian screams at you, the police officer screams at you, everyone else screams at you. Let us learn to perhaps reflect a little bit more in our relationship with each other. Nigerian security and safety is also dependent on what the keynote speaker mentioned, affordable and accessible health care. I did not know my father to be sick. All the time I grew up, he never went to the hospital. I was in South Korea as a Korea Foundation Field Fellow when I got the call, 2012. He had passed. I said, what? What happened? He went for simple hernia surgery, something that is done as outpatient here and elsewhere. So why didn't you people call me before you take my father to the hospital? I visited the hospital. Needless to say, it is not a hospital. It doesn't even qualify as a hospital. It's not because I had not tried, Prof, on my own to engineer a community-based healthcare system. I tried with my colleagues in Houston, some of them medical doctors, but the system on the ground, the people on the ground have to facilitate our capacity in the diaspora to bring back home the kinds of services that will improve the life of our people. It's a safety issue. When you think about healthcare, you don't have clean water. It's a safety issue. When you think about healthcare, you don't have good refrigeration system. It's a safety issue when you think about healthcare and you have built this hospital with several floors and you have a theater on a floor higher than second floor and you have no working elevator. In other words, we need our architects, we need our engineers, we need social scientists, we need our chemists in a multi-dimensional way to think about the space called Nigeria and the services that Nigeria and Nigerians can provide for everyone. It's not a one-dimensional thing. Healthcare has got it. We need an education environment that enhances every Nigerian's global, domestic, regional competitiveness. I don't know if any of you have looked at the data that was just recently released in Nigeria of those that passed the school certificate. If you've looked at it, you have to stop and wonder, what does the future hold? What does the future hold? I personally have trained 7 people through the university system in Nigeria. Only one of them I can competently say, or honestly say, actually knows something. The rest of them have diplomas. And if with the resources I was able to provide from here to train these individuals, we are put in something else, perhaps it could have yielded some serious profit. But none of these 6 people, none of them have jobs. The only person with a job is in Dubai. The 6 are sitting, and I'm still, every month when I'm paid, I have to pay not just my mother, thank God I have the privilege to do that, but all other relatives. That's a safety issue for me. It's an economic safety issue engineered by inefficient infrastructure, educational infrastructure. The people who are complaining in Nigeria, how many of you here, I won't ask that. Look at the Nigerian professors. The Nigerian professors are one of the major constituencies undermining the country.
That's right.
You can clap all you want, but that is a fact. They are one of the major constituencies. When I met with them several times ago, as recent as in May this year, I repeated the same to about 10 of them in Canada. You are complaining about the young people not being able to read and write, not knowing what they are supposed to be doing. You taught them. You're complaining about the leaders. You taught those leaders. What you do with the curriculum is reflected in the practice out there in Nigeria and elsewhere. Access to clean water. I've mentioned this before. It's a safety issue. When I go home, my favorite place to be is in my village. It's in my village because there is no electricity. We don't have pipe-borne water. We don't have any, industry. And I don't even have a car. So, Prof, Molue, I know the in and out of how you catch it. The fact is, in fact, when I was, one of the times I had the privilege to work closely with certain people in Abuja, I was supposed to be, or not supposed, I was given escort. After the very first day, I said, no, thank you, I don't want to die. How did I take the Okada? I love riding Okada because I can tell them stop, and they will stop. But when you think about the issue of clean water, when you think about the issue of sanitation and waste management services, these are the areas all of us in the diaspora will easily come in to help with. But is the policy framework and the institutional framework ready for that? Just one example of what personally I'm doing or helping based on my role here at The Ohio State University. We are helping to train 100 master's students and 20 PhDs at the Sokono University of Tanzania, thanks to a $24 million grant, which was upped by another $6 million by US aid. These government officials will come and sit with them and ask them questions. They will answer honestly. One of the questions I asked them was, you are a college of agriculture. How much of the food your students eat are produced by your university? The first time they said, no, nothing. I said, okay, what makes you a university of agriculture? These are government officials and university administrators coming, and we are showing them the path. That is changing and changing dramatically. I have made the same suggestion to at least 3 constituencies in Nigeria. Nothing has come up of it. Chris, the eminent professor, is here. We've tried to bring Nigerians together. The chop-I-chop mentality remains alive and well. Unfortunately, some of us are not into that. If you go home, I'm making a public statement. I'm being recorded. If you go home and you find a university whose administration is competent and they are willing to put together a team that can come and visit, I'll provide the good offices of The Ohio State University to begin to explore ways of enhancing that university's capacity to do what it does well in the area of agriculture, in the area of clean water, in the area of environmental services, because we have one of the best qualities in this country, in this area. By the way, I made the same promise to assemblymen from Lagos State who came to visit Columbus not quite 3 months ago. I said, go, put these things together, take me up on it and see if it works. Only one condition. No bribery, no corruption, accountability. Every penny you get is going to show how it was spent. I'm still waiting. The bigger issue with safety and security in Nigeria is our roads. Reliable road infrastructure, rail, air, waterways. The government can truly put a platform in place that will enable members of the diaspora to play a role. The series of accidents occurring on our roads is a major safety hazard. In June, I was in China. A member of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, whom I had debated in Seoul, South Korea, on Chinese-Africa relations, said, Prof, you are right about us not, meaning the Chinese, not doing what we are supposed to be doing, which is building solid infrastructure based on the contract that we get. I said, how did you come to that conclusion? He had gone to ask his people, and I went to China, Beijing, specifically Shanghai. Those of you who have been, you know how solid the Chinese build in their own countries. The reason they build solid structures is because they have government that holds them accountable. This response to Nigeria and other African countries is, when you guys are ready, we will build the kind of infrastructure we know how to build. For now, you are not ready, so we give you what you want. And if you look at the roads they have built, whether it's in Angola, in Mozambique, in Uganda, in Nigeria, when you look at the roads, in Senegal, give it one rainy season, the roads start to come apart. Because, as my wife will say, they are just painting the roads with time. No serious engineering involved. It's a safety hazard. That's why the roads are not good, so you can't bring in very good cars. And I'm not talking about Abuja. Abuja to me is not Nigeria. Abuja is some fantasy somewhere. I'm talking about the areas of Nigeria where I go to. You probably will lose 2 years of your life if you get stuck in the traffic in Onisha, Niger Bridge Road. You will lose 2 years.
It was 2 weeks ago.
Okay. You get there, there is no exit point. There is no exit point. You just have to wait, consume the exhaust that comes from the carbon monoxide, you name it. Your life is just wasting sitting there. And if you're like me, every now and then you get down and look at the faces of the people that are just standing, you look at the faces of the women who are selling their goods. You look at the men, you can see the type of insecurity born of inadequate attention to institution, to accountability, to construction, and to human relations. Reliable sources of energy. We have all the skills out here. And remember I told you I've never been anywhere where I have not seen a Nigerian. Nigerians are everywhere. Nigerians are everywhere. When I talk about somebody bringing medicine at the border into Nigeria, guess who does one of those intellectual property issues attention for the United States? It's a Nigerian. It's a Nigerian. He's the one that sits at the border, if you will, intellectually, putting it together. And someday, we'll get there. We also need stable economic environment that promotes long-term stability for job creation. The problem with Nigeria is not poverty. Nigeria is not poor. Nigerians are not poor. Nigerians are hardworking people. If that were not the case, I would not meet Nigerians all over the world that I have traveled. holding responsible positions. What we need is a psychological change that imposes our myths, our narrative visions, our memories, our history, our emotions into the space called Nigeria. That space. We need that change, because when we do, we will realize the job of eliminating poverty is simple. What people see as poverty is creating employment. Is creating employment. One of those rare opportunities I had was in Lagos when Tinubu was still governor. In one evening meeting, I told the folks that we are gathered, can you imagine how many jobs you will create in Lagos State? Just by making the right policy. The question was what? I said, look, everybody hangs their clothes all over the place. Everyone hangs their clothes all over the place. By the way, I grew up in Ajegule. No home, no houses are painted. Can you imagine if you make a law, beautification of Lagos State law? He said, explain some more. Make a law that says every owner of a house must paint it once every 5 years. And if you're building a home, you must have a cloth hanger in the back of the house so that nothing is hanging on the window. Somebody asked me, how does that create job? I said, okay, good. I like those kinds of questions. You are going to be employing painters, carpenters, bricklayers. When you talk about painting, you take one industry. That industry touches a number of other areas. You will create massive employment just by that one decision. It's just like if a university in Nigeria was serious, we import food. The British that colonized us, Nigeria up until 1970, actually had surplus food. By 1973, we had started to import food. I know what the gentleman, billionaire Dangote, is trying to do. I applaud him, it's wonderful. I hope it works. But can you imagine if a university was to work with, say, flour mills in Nigeria? Flour mills, all the raw materials they use is wheat for the spaghetti you people eat back home. That can be grown in Nigeria and fed into flour mills. As you're growing it, you're employing university students. You're creating chain manufacturing, chain supply. You are connecting with this company that is expanding and employing more people. You stop importing wheat. You begin to package and export. Job is a safety issue. Because when Nigerians don't have jobs, we get into all kinds of nefarious activities. Create jobs and not focus on poverty, because poverty you cannot cure. There is the poverty of ideas. There are the psychological poverty, poverty of ethics, which is predominant across board. Indeed, let me just read two sections to conclude about what I have been talking to you about, the way we professors conceptualize these things. The most important function of an effective Nigerian government has to be the maintenance of law and order for the safety and security of the citizens. The benefits of a well-ordered state, society are specific. Established rule of law stabilizes the government and holds it accountable to the citizens. Rule of law ensures predictability that enables people and businesses to make long-term plans. It builds trust and confidence in people that when changes occur, they will be based on rational assessment within a framework of continuity. Rule of law empowers civil society organizations, businesses, and other actors in society to engage in various initiatives that lead to long-term investment in the economy, culture, and traditions of the people. Rule of law establishes a framework for politics as a basis for resolving public goods problems within limits and constraints imposed by individuals' roles, resources, and ideas. One more explanation. After law and order, the provision of infrastructure services is perhaps the most important function that the Nigerian government can render to its citizens. At the core of infrastructure services is, quote, adequate transportation, power, water, communications, and pipelines that underlie the government's ability to provide security, administration, investment in human capital, and the necessary conditions for a strong Nigeria that is able to govern on a platform for sustainable industrial economic growth and development. Effective governments undertake such projects as water management for irrigation and power, as well as providing funding of technological research that have the capacity to solve public goods. These are the things we expect from our government. Without infrastructure, integrating rural and urban areas through the market and social services become quite difficult. As a consequence, pockets of poverty and unemployment will persist with severe consequences on safety and security of the most vulnerable citizens. Indeed, without infrastructure, our government's capacity for carrying out its security functions is challenged, as evident in the northeast part of Nigeria and other ungoverned spaces in our country. States that depend on international community to provide their infrastructure often find their problems remain unresolved because international donors pay relatively little attention to operations and maintenance of roads when they are done building them. Thus, we should view with concern the implication of awarding infrastructure contracts to foreign firms without adequate oversight by efficient Nigerian bureaucrats and technocrats. Given the foregoing, why has Nigeria failed to meet its obligations across several areas of concern for its citizens? This is the question I respond to in the rest of the paper by suggesting what? Going back to the basics and building the infrastructure, the governance infrastructure. Government is different from the state. Government is different from the state. Government is people and institutions. When we know who these people are, we can hold them accountable. Just like government should hold us as individuals accountable for our rights and responsibilities and the ways we perform them in our country. For our security, our safety is truly dependent on collective collaboration between the people and the government. I thank you for the privilege to be with you.